streaming.
Do you know how bad things have to be for Sayyid Muhammad Hashimi to say, I regret doing so much khayati?
Very bad. Okay, stop. We are live now. Okay. Okay, I've sent you the link. It's also in the Okay.
Okay, wait, let me tweet this.
I tweeted with the Afghan eye the link.
Okay, you tweet it from the Al-Ghana.
Done?
Yeah, just about. That's it.
Welcome to the Afghan Eye YouTube channel. If this is your first visit, Make sure to subscribe and press the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our new videos. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another Afghan Eye Live. I'm your host Sangar Paikar.
Feels weird saying it, but I'm ahmed-waleed Kakar. It's been a while.
Okay, so can you salute people again, because there was some distortion, I think.
No worries. So I said that I'm ahmed-waleed Kakar for everyone that didn't know. But yeah, it feels weird to be back because we've been gone for quite a while.
Yes. Okay. So everyone in the chat.
So everyone is saying that there's an echo for my voice.
But not anymore, I think. The echo is fixed, right? Rabia Ahmed? Yeah, thank you very much. So, Quers Quick, Rabia Ahmed, X Full, Michelle, everyone, welcome to the chat. Welcome back. Waleed, so where were you all this time? Why weren't you doing any live streams? What was wrong with you?
Well, I think it was, I think both of us were somewhat busy. We had technical problems the last time we tried to go live. Yeah, busy. It's been Ramadan, work-related things. So it's been a busy but quite eventful last 2 months. I'm sure you'd agree. And not all of it has been positive either. But we'll get into that. I feel like someone is saying that your beard has grown longer with the IEA. I think I've left my beard slightly as well, to be honest with you, but
yeah,
it's getting really itchy, so I think I may have to shorten it slightly. But yeah, Sangar, how have you been doing? Where have you been?
Well, I've been very busy with work because I am working more days and more hours than I used to. And when we started Afghan Eye back then, in 2020, I wasn't working full time, and it was also due to lockdowns, etc. I had to do a lot of things at home. But now I have to be at work 4 or 5 days a week, and my job is quite demanding. It requires a lot of attention, focus, and while I'm doing that, if I try to keep up with all the news in Afghanistan, the maintenance of this platform, fixing audio, video, finding people that we can interview, doing some research, verifying stuff, fact checking, that requires a lot of time and energy. So for the last couple of months, I've done pretty much only tweeting, because that's all I could do, and everything else.
You know what? I'll give it to you. I think you were pretty effective in doing that.
Yeah. So see, the thing is, I have a separate phone. This is basically everything related to Afghan Eye. So the people I interview, my Twitter account, our YouTube channel, everything is connected to this phone. And basically, I do all my Afghan Eye related stuff via this phone. So when I can't do much for Afghan Eye, I just leave this phone behind and I go to work. And then when I come back in the evening and then I see, oh, well, schools are banned. Oh, more good news. Everything is messed up. And then
I remember someone was sending me these tweets. So before the school disaster that is ongoing,
catastrophe,
this ongoing catastrophe, I remember you had tweeted saying, look, I'm going to take a break from Twitter a couple of days beforehand. And so schools, this catastrophe happened. And then people started sending me these tweets of other people who, let's just say, they don't really like you. And they were all saying, oh, where is that Dutch guy? He had advanced knowledge. He knew, and that's why he took the break from Twitter. And I was like, oh man, if only we did know, maybe we'd have been able to, show how bad that the thing would be. But I think there's a broader point to be made here as well before we delve into the topic of today. Um, Ultimately, you mentioned as well when we started the Afghaneye in 2020. Now, in 2020, the circumstances in Afghanistan were radically different to what we have now. So, whilst right now things are not ideal and there is a lot going on that is, not really acceptable for anyone of any sort of moral conscience, it was worse in 2020. And in 2020, when we came about, we were very prominent in advocating for a peace process because we believed that war was not the solution. We believed that the occupation of Afghanistan was something that was objectively, in and of itself, inherently bad. And now we are where we are, where the occupation is no longer a thing. However, our role in sort of criticizing, critiquing, and holding power accountable is still a thing, except the government is now different. But we also have to juxtapose that with the reality that the infrastructure, the global infrastructure that underpinned occupation and war in our country for 20 or 43 years is still very much a reality that we have to contend with. So we, our small fakirana, now maybe not so small nowadays, but our humble our enterprise that started off as a humble one is stuck. I don't want to say stuck, but is juggling and juxtaposing these two realities that we have a government in Kabul that, yes, whilst there is to a large extent peace and security, in other aspects seems to be opposed to acting like a normal government, whilst we are caught between the global media and coverage that underpinned, justified, and glorified the war and the occupation of our country. So going forward, that obviously means that the people that we have upset so far will probably not start liking us. However, the people that we made happy will perhaps start to become upset by us. But, that is just part of the game, and that is part of the deal that we have made in our sort of what motivates us in starting this platform as well as continuing it. So I just wanted to put that out there for everyone, to acknowledge that the reality has changed, just as, Afghanistan has changed radically. So too, our approach is motivated by the same sort of desire, but, things will obviously be not 100% as they were prior to August. But that, without further ado, let us get into the latest news in Afghanistan, which is, well, since the last time we were live, a lot has happened. We have had this ongoing catastrophe about schools, and we are being told that very soon we will receive good news, and that everyone in the government is very hopeful that things will turn back to normal and that schools will be open, including people at the very top of government who seem to be powerless to do anything, but they are hopeful. And it will be very soon, just like Eid is very soon, just like the Day of Judgment is very soon, just like everything else is very soon. We have the increasing activity of our Ministry of Propagation of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice, whose remit and specification is vague and unknown, which does things that later clarifies as being advice, but it doesn't really seem advisory if you're giving advice to people, telling them this is banned. And we obviously have these escalating tensions along the Durand line, in which recently, a couple of days ago, we had something like 47 civilians killed by Pakistani airstrikes. So, Sangar, let's get started.
Okay, so let's just move on to the main story of today. First and foremost, we have here an article in Al Jazeera English. At least 47 dead in Afghanistan after Pakistan attacks. give you some context, so what has happened in the last couple of months is that for the guys who are regular viewers of our live stream, there was a period where there were some negotiations between the TTP, the Tehreek Taliban Pakistan, and the Pakistani government, when Prime Minister Imran Khan was still the Prime Minister of our neighboring country. And those negotiations failed. We did a whole live stream about it, I think even 2, where we discussed that matter in detail. But those negotiations failed, and TTP has launched an offensive where many Pakistani soldiers were killed in the last couple of months. And about a week ago, when Prime Minister Imran Khan was ousted from his office, we won't discuss the details of it now, but maybe at some other time. Shortly after that, the Pakistani military conducted an airstrike in Khost and Kunar, which are 2 provinces along the Durand Line. And in these 2 provinces, there have been sanctuaries for refugees from the tribal area of Pakistan, which is not considered the tribal area anymore. They are not referred to as Fatah anymore. They're part of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. But these people have fled the military operations along the Durand Line, and they have escaped to Khost, Kunar, Nangarhar, Paktia, Paktika. And basically, there are small settlements of refugees, women and children, elderly. However, these sanctuaries are targeted now, as we have learned, by the Pakistani military. And during these attacks, 47 civilians were killed. We've seen images, we've seen videos, we've heard testimonies from eyewitnesses that civilians were indeed killed. And contrary to the official line of the Pakistani military, Pakistani military obviously says we attacked TTP and we attacked terrorists. But I would say that judging by all the sources that we have seen from Afghanistan, it doesn't seem to be the case. So this article quotes Shabir Ahmad Osmani, Director of Information and Culture from Khost. Yes, and he says 41 civilians, mainly women and children, were killed. 22 others were wounded. Okay, and then we have the other source that is mentioned by Al Jazeera, is Tolo News. Tolo News is obviously the US-backed news channel in Afghanistan, and they published videos and images of victims from that particular airstrike. And this is basically the map of Afghanistan. As you can see, Kunar and Khost, they are 2 eastern provinces along the Durand Line. And as I mentioned earlier, there are settlements of refugees from the tribal area. And those settlements are described by the Pakistanis as TTP camps, but basically there are places where refugees, women and children, elderly, like families, live there because their entire villages and homes were demolished during the Operation Zarba Azb. And these people, they have no place to return. So if they cross the Durand Line, go back to their place of origin where they are originally from, whether it's in Bajawar or whether it's in Waziristan, the entire villages were flattened and demolished. So these people, they have no place to go back to, and that's why they are still living in camps in Khost, Kunar, and other regions. And these people were targeted. So naturally, the anger in Afghanistan, thousands of people took it to the streets in Khost first. then in Nangarhar, close to the Torkham at Durand Line, and today was a mass protest in Kandahar. So people are obviously very angered in Afghanistan because it's not just an attack on a settlement of refugees. It's basically an attack on this side of the Durand Line. It is a violation of the sovereignty of Afghanistan. And this is the reason why people in Afghanistan demand from the Islamic Emirate to respond. Some people have even chanted during protests that they need to respond in kind, they need to conduct attacks against the Pakistanis. And emotions are running really high because it's also the month of Ramadan. People are fasting in Afghanistan. It is a holy month. It is a religious how would you say, a religious month where people are very sensitive about these issues. And this has caused so much outrage in Afghanistan and even outside Afghanistan. We see on social media Afghans from all around the world are condemning this attack. We've seen many Pakistanis who have learned through social media that this attack was carried out against civilians. They were also condemning this attack. We have someone in the chat right now who wasn't aware of this incident. This brother also said that as a Pakistani, I feel ashamed and I'm disturbed. He was also obviously disturbed when he found out that civilians were targeted. So we have quite a scandal on our hand. Wouldn't you agree, Waleed?
I would say so, yeah. And the response from the Afghan side as well has been pretty forthcoming, but a bit mixed. It's not really been clear to decipher. But there's a Sanger pour Google Doc qui y a a video de host de Tchadach Maziara.
Yes. You mean the
Dwahame.
The Twitter link, right?
Whoa.
Okay, let's go to the video. Hi. I must say, it really felt like gut-wrenching when I heard about what has happened. And just 1 second, Okay. So Waleed, aside from the video that we are going to play now, are there any other reports, anything that you want to share later?
I mean, I think this Al Jazeera article basically summarized it pretty well. Basically gave, and that's the reason I picked it, by the way, it gave the Pakistani side, gave the Afghan side. And yeah, that's basically it. But I don't think there's any doubt on the fact that this struck a refugee camp. But when Zabiullah Mujahid,
just 1 second, I got the video. Let's.
Okay.
Okay. So here we go.
Alaska dunia workti.
So, as you can see in this attack,
you can hear the Pashto as well. It does sound very Masid-like.
Yeah, it is basically these people are from South Waziristan, I think.
Yeah.
And what has happened is that the entire settlement, the village, is demolished, and they're saying in the video that there are still people buried under the rubble. There are more than 10 people buried under the rubble, and I think, considering all the tensions right now between Afghanistan and Pakistan and the internal issues in Pakistan with ousting of Imran Khan, all these protests in Karachi, in many major cities, this is sort of actually worsening the situation. Like, we are already in a very tense situation, and this attack has major implications. What would you say, what is in your opinion, what is the biggest takeaway from what has happened?
Well, the thing is that, you're going to get accused of conspiracy theories and the like, but the reality is that within Pakistan right now, there's a massive crisis of trust, or a deficiency of trust in the establishment, and specifically in the military, right? Because of what is perceived, and I'm being really careful in my words, not because I'm a slimy politician here, but unless there's like a proven case, then you have to sort of err on the side of caution. There is a perceived unwillingness of the army to stand by Imran Khan, or a perceived cooperation of the army with the Americans in ousting Imran Khan. And Imran Khan, once again, is just another Pakistani prime minister who has never actually completed his full term in office, right? And he's been ousted in what is, considered widely across the country, as evidenced by the crowds of hundreds of thousands of people, to have been ousted in an American conspiracy because his foreign policy was too independent. We know, for example, in that interview he did with the American journalist, the famous "absolutely not," when he was asked if he would allow Pakistani airspace or territory to be used in intelligence operations for Afghanistan. He recently traveled to Russia. So all of these things coming together do give this theory, this accusation, this allegation that he was ousted in an American conspiracy a lot of credibility. And the fact that the army did something of the sort, for the first time, right, adds further credibility to that perspective. Now, obviously, on the other side, you could say that the fact that the TTP are basically running riot across Pakistan, or specifically across the tribal areas, and killing a lot of soldiers. So, you could, of course, look at it both ways, but you could also look at it in a way where, there are numerous explanations to be made for this. You could say maybe this was just a publicity stunt for the army to basically distract people and get people behind its side at a time when it's feeling pressure. Maybe this is, the result of a deal that's been struck between the new government in Pakistan and the United States. Or maybe, it actually is about the TTP, but, all of the indicators on the ground suggest that TTP haven't actually been killed over here. And this is, by all measures, a refugee camp. So from that perspective, it's difficult to justify. And I know there are a couple of people in the chat and a couple of people that will watch this afterwards and be, typical Afghan, Nawak Haram, whatever it is, right? You're being biased. And, I think you have to be honest. Maybe I am biased. But from what I can see, I can't see that any TTP have been killed in here. That's certainly not what sources on the ground report, and certainly not what the videos and the footage suggests. So I think we should go, now that we've sort of established, or we've basically shown that side of it, I think we should go and examine the Afghan response. So there have been a number of different statements issued by Zabiullah Mujahid, and then we'll go and we'll analyze the statement of the Pakistani Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well. So Sangar, da awal de Zabiullah Mujahid da urshkaraka.
Yes. So this is a tweet that was posted on the 16th of April, where the spokesman of the Emirate, and I think he's the deputy minister of Ministry of Information and Culture.
And culture, yeah.
Zabiullah Mujahid says the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan strongly condemns Pakistan's attack on refugees in Khost and Kunar. There was some controversy because he used the word refugee, which Afghan, especially Pashtun nationalists interpret it as, well, he is calling Pashtuns from the other side of the Durand Line refugee as if they are foreigners. And then, so the next paragraph
It's not, I think beyond that, though, like, why does it matter that they're refugees?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Like if
we're going to adopt that, like, okay, so, if they're refugees, or it doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if it hit a farm, right?
Yeah,
you attacked us.
Because people who escaped from the war in Helmand and other regions and settled in Kabul, they were also being called refugees. But anyway, so let's not discuss the semantics. But the Islamic Emirate calls on the Pakistani side not to test the patience of Afghans on such issues and not repeat the same mistake again. Otherwise, it will have bad consequences. That sounds like a threat. Okay.
Yes.
And then problems between the two countries must be resolved through political means.
Okay.
Now
this is the thing. There's been a lot of people have been saying, oh, well, the Islamic Emirate has been vague in saying whether civilians have been killed or anything else, which is why I دوهمه فيديو مستا أغمد زبيولا مجاهد جاغ داي بكشي So this is a tweet from an account called Islam Pal Pashtun,
who's a very toxic guy,
who's very toxic, very pro IEA, very anti-Pakistani army. But his personal statements aside, this voice is of Zabiullah Mujahids, and we will translate this as we go along.
I think we will get a lot of hate tweets from him. All right, here we go.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. د افغانستان اسلامي امارت دغه پیښه او بمبار او برید چې د پاکستان لخوانه د افغانستان په خاور باندې سوی د په ټولو سختو ټکو باندې غندي او دا یو ظلم ده او د افغانستان د پاکستان ترمن دښمنۍ ته لار ورول دي چې د هیڅ ملت او هیواد په ګټه نه ده. او اگر که دا بریدونه سوي دي دا وزیرستاني مهاجرینو چې د کلونو وړاندې ته د جګړو له امله راکړه سوي د خوست په ولایت کې اوسېدل یا ته امتداد د ډیورنډ کرښه کې څیر اوسي د جګړو نه رابېځایه سوي خلک دي. نو په هغو باندې بمبار کول ښځې ماشومان او واړه په شهادت رسول دا یو ظالمانه عمل د موږ غندو او د دې مسلې د مخنیوي لپاره موږ له ټولو لارو نه کار اخلو چې داسې پیښې بیا تکرار نه سي او د افغانستان د خاورې حریم ته درناوی وسي. پاکستاني لوري باید په دې باندې پوه سي جګړه که پیل کیږي دا به د چا په ګټه هم نه وي، دا به د سیمې د بېثباتۍ سبب ګرځي او افغانانو بیا د خپل هیواد د ساتنې په برخه کې امتحان ورکړی د دغه نږدې اته میاشتې وړاندې د امریکایانو ماتې د یو لوی درس او عبرت د ټولو هغو متجاوزونو لپاره داسې څوک غواړي د افغانستان خاورې او حریت او ازادۍ ته په سپکه وګوري. افغانان باید مجبور نه سي چې یو اقدام وکړي. موږ اوس کوشش کوو چې دا موضوع د سیاسي او ډیپلوماټیکو لارو نه حل سي او د بیا تکرار مخنیوی وسي او غواړو چې پاکستاني لوري هم په دې مورد تعمق او تعقل نه کار واخلي او اشتباهات تکرار نه کړي چې بیا د افغانانو حوصله که وازمایل سي بیا نتیجه منفي راوځي او د ملتونو ترمنځ د درز او مخالفت سبب کیږي او بیا به افغانان مجبوریږي چې خپل خاورې د دفاع لپاره په متقابل اقدام لاس پورې کړي.
Okay, so first of all, what was your impression about this more elaborate statement?
So there's a confirmation. Confirmation, someone's going to say he is lying, but there is the statement that these were actually Pakistani citizens of the tribal areas who, yes, of course, they are our Afghan or Pashtun cousins, but they are obviously refugees from the other side of the Durand line. And before someone kills me, Afghanistan has a history of absorbing and welcoming refugees, whether they were Uzbeks from Bukhara and Samarkand in the 1920s or in the late 1800s. So this isn't to say that their right to life is somewhat lessened by the fact that they're from the other side of the line, but just to emphasize, of course, that these people are obviously people that would be normally considered Pakistani citizens. So he says that they have been killed, and they were the Pakistanis that have been displaced in 2014. 2014 was an important year because it was the year in which Pakistani military launched its massive operation in the tribal areas called Zarb-e-Azb, which was very brutal, actually, which included scorched earth, carpet bombing, so on and so forth, and which resulted in these people moving to Afghanistan. And he obviously emphasizes the fact that enmity between Afghanistan and Pakistan benefits no one. However, there is the threat that use deep contemplation and thinking to not do such a thing ever again. Otherwise, Afghans have been proven to defend their country, exceptionally, and for the patience of Afghans to not be tested. Sangar was Google Dr. Larse Alta Yobalak Samsta, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yes, people in the chat, they were asking in the chat about translation, but the link that we showed, the video that we showed just now, it had subtitles. I think you guys could read the subtitles, but in case you haven't, please go to Twitter and check the handle called Islampal with double A, and then you will find this video and there are subtitles, so you can read the subtitles and then get exactly what was said. But my comment regarding this video is that I would say it was very, very stern. I expected that they would say something in that nature because you see, violation of sovereignty is like something that is now very clearly the first time in the last 8 months that something of this nature is happening in Afghanistan, and people expect harsh response from their government. So that's why I wasn't really surprised by what Zabiullah Mujahid said. But let's go to the statement of the Afghan Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So here we see a picture of the Pakistani ambassador sitting across Foreign Minister Mr. Muttaqi.
So let's read the caption first. Okay. So scroll up. So Pakistani ambassador to Kabul summoned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs today, along with the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan's Foreign Minister Maulawi Amir Khan Muttaqi. The session also included Deputy Defense Minister Al-Hajj Mullah Shirin Akhund, where the Afghan side condemned the recent attacks on Khost and Kunar provinces, stressing the prevention of such acts. Minister Muttaqi said all military violations, including that in Khost and Kunar, must be prevented, as such acts deteriorate relations between the two countries, allowing antagonists to misuse the situation, leading to undesired consequences. To end, the Pakistani ambassador was given a strong démarche to deliver to his leaders. But my problem is the picture. Can we look at the picture?
Yes, we can.
Zoom in because the picture arrow here be the caption
Yes.
Does that look like a sort of a summoning? It doesn't. It looks like they're having a chat. In fact, the Afghan side's heads are down.
Yes.
What's going on?
Yes, so this is from my optic perspective. It is a terrible, terrible picture because basically Abdul Qahar Balkhi is looking down, Haji Mullah Shirin is looking down, and Amir Khan Muttaqi is facing away from the ambassador. And the ambassador is just laid back, sitting like that. And those two other guys are also basically staring the Afghans down. So this reveals how the foreign ministry of Afghanistan don't know what they're doing. First of all, when you summon a ambassador of another country due to some sort of diplomatic incident, then it's not the minister who is going to talk to that minister, to that ambassador. A lower ranked diplomat from the foreign ministry will summon the ambassador of the other country, not the minister. So here we see the minister himself is summoning, but then they publish this photograph, which from an optic perspective is like not conveying any positive messages regarding the whole posture of the Islamic Emirate.
Like honestly, I have a lot of problems with the way Afghan nationalists tend to view things. But let's say, all right, let's take their side of the argument. Let's take the side of the argument that yes, okay, the ambassador should have been summoned. The ambassador's two aides look like kings. Look at them.
Yeah.
Just look at them. Right? And we have a guy who is called by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Al-Hajj Mullah Shirin Akhund, right? Now that name is haybati. It has a weight to it. The picture itself is not denoting or displaying that haybat, that weight that his name carries. And he's the deputy, I believe, defense minister. So there could be a question asked, why the hell is the deputy defense minister there? But I'm not even going to ask that. I'm just going to say, from an optical perspective, terrible, awful. And I don't think that anything, that there needs to be anything more said than that. But, we have evaluated to some extent the Afghan response so far. So Sangar, alta pade doki de Pakistanian und de Wazarat Kharije E'lamiyam sta agaba miyaud zaisar mutali'a ko.
Samada. Okay, so here we go to the statement of the Pakistani Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So this is after the summoning.
So there's something interesting in this statement, right? Which indicates that the Pakistanis want to be conciliatory. Now, everyone, the Afghan Nationalist Brigade are going to be like, ISI justice, whatever, but hear me out. Just listen before you call me whatever.
All right.
Now let's go.
So here is press release. In response to media queries regarding recent incident along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, the spokesperson stated the following. 1.
Let's go. In the last few days, incidents along... So by the way, we call it the Durand line because, our policy or perspective is that this is an arbitrary line. So when you see the Pakistani side insistent on referring to it as the Pak-Afghan border, it's their way of saying that, this is an official, legitimate border. So that controversy manifests itself in how the two sides refer to the line. In the last few days, incidents along Pak-Afghan border have significantly increased, wherein Pakistani security forces are being targeted from across the border. Number 2, Pakistan has repeatedly requested the Afghan government in the last few months to secure Pak-Afghan border region. Terrorists are using Afghan soil with impunity to carry out such activities inside Pakistan. 3, Pakistan and Afghanistan have been engaged for the past several months through institutional channels for effective coordination and security along our long shared border. Unfortunately, elements of banned terrorist groups in the border region, including TTP, have continued to attack Pakistan's border security posts, resulting in the martyrdom of several Pakistani troops. On the 14th of April 2022 as well, 7 Pakistan army soldiers were martyred in North Waziristan district by terrorists operating from Afghanistan. Number 4, Pakistan once again strongly condemns terrorists operating with impunity from Afghan soil to carry out activities in Pakistan. This is detrimental to our efforts of maintaining peace and stability along the Pak-Afghan border. Number 5, and this is where it gets interesting. Okay, I'm going to read this slowly, and I want you to see, Sangar, where there is something of note here. Okay. If you don't get it, it's fine because we're fasting. But Pakistan requests the sovereign government of Afghanistan to secure the Pak-Afghan border region and take stern actions against individuals involved in terrorist activities in Pakistan in the interest of peace and progress of the two brotherly countries. Number 6, Pakistan also takes this opportunity to reaffirm respect for Afghanistan's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Pakistan will continue to work closely with the Afghan government to strengthen bilateral relations in all fields. Now, before we go over all of that, number 5, did you notice anything of note?
No, please elaborate.
Pakistan requests the sovereign government of Afghanistan to secure Pak-Afghan border region.
Yeah.
Sounds a lot like recognition, right?
Yeah. But
which is weird, okay? Which is weird because they've basically come along and said, look, okay, so there are there's another thing that they've repeated twice, okay? Impunity is a word that they keep using. These terrorists are operating with impunity from within Afghan soil, right? And the fact that, yes, we've attacked you, but, this is all, we don't want to do anything more. We want peace and good relations and whatever, and so on and so forth. So they've basically punched us in the face, but said, whatever, like, this is all we want to do. Please don't, do anything else. We want to be friends with you. And they've basically used terminology that suggests that there is somewhat recognition there. What do you make of it, Sangar?
I think, this is just wordplay because it may have the intention to be, as you said, reconciliatory towards the Islamic Emirate. But if you basically look at it from a very critical perspective, it doesn't mean much. Why? Mm-hmm. Because they still haven't formally recognized them. Plus, they're violating the sovereignty of that said country by
another point as well is that Pakistan doesn't really have the clout, let's say, of the United States, where if they recognize us, others will. You see, in fact, it's been waiting for others to recognize us so it can jump ship and basically do the thing. So in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty insubstantial, not very substantial, right?
Thank you.
But it is something of note. Now, it is true that Pakistani soldiers are being killed by TTP, and Pakistan is currently suffering from, or benefiting from, obviously based on your perspective, from a TTP resurgence. And we'll get into that in a bit. But we also have the hero of Pashtun rights, champion of our dignity, Mohsen Dawar, who stood in the Pakistani parliament and condemned the attack. So let's watch that together as well. I happen to understand quite a bit of Urdu, so I was able to understand it. For those of you that don't understand it, I'm sorry, but let's just see what Dawar's side had to say.
Okay, let me get the video. Yes, since Urdu is an international language and we are very international, we assume that a significant portion of our audience understands some Urdu.
We are cosmopolitan Afghans.
Yes, indeed.
से पहले मैं आज कल रात को जो वाकया हुआ है वो इंतहाई अफसोसनाक वाकया हुआ है कि शुमाली वजीरिस्तान के वो आईडीपीज जो ज़रब-ए-अज़ब शुरू होने से पहले अफगानिस्तान के बॉर्डर को क्रॉस करके अफगानिस्तान चले गए और वो अभी तक वहां पर फंसे हुए हैं। पिछली हुकूमत ने उनको वापस लाने के लिए कोई पॉलिसी नहीं बनाई और वो इंतहाई बुरी हालत में वहां पर जिंदगी गुजार रहे हैं। और कल रात को पाकिस्तानी फौज के तैयारों ने, पाकिस्तानी एयरफोर्स के तैयारों ने अफगान बॉर्डर के उस तरफ मीर सफर रुस्से इलाका मुरहा के इलाकों में बमबारी की और 40 से ज्यादा अफराद उसमें जान बहक हुए, शहीद हुए हैं। तो मैं उसकी भी मजम्मत करता हूं जनाब स्पीकर। ये बाज चीजें ऐसी हैं जो कि हमारी रेड लाइंस हैं, जिस पर हम किसी सूरत भी कंप्रोमाइज नहीं कर सकते, जिस पर हम किसी सूरत भी खामोश नहीं रह सकते। इस चीज को रोकना होगा। पहले ही हमें इतना जख्म दे चुके हैं, इतने जख्म हमें मिल चुके हैं जिसका मदावा अभी तक नहीं हुआ। वो जो जेट तैयारों की बमबारियां हैं जो कि पूरे के पूरे शहर मलियामट किए गए हैं, उसका मदावा अभी तक नहीं हुआ और ऊपर से ये बमबारियों का सिलसिला शुरू हुआ। तो ये इंतहाई अफसोसनाक है। इसकी भरपूर तहकीकात भी होनी चाहिए और जिसने भी ये ऑपरेशन प्लान किया है उसके खिलाफ कार्रवाई, जो कि होनी नहीं है, मुझे पता है कि नहीं होनी, लेकिन बहरहाल हमने ये एहतजाज अपना यहां पर रिकॉर्ड पर जरूर लाना है। जनाब
So, in a rare twist of fate, I actually agree with Mohsen Dawar.
Yes, I do. I think
So
this was a very good statement because what was absolutely necessary that within the Pakistani establishment, within the Pakistani elite, somebody raises this issue and condemns it in the such how would you say? A very
strong words.
Strong words. Yes.
Let's just quickly translate what he said. So he said that yesterday, last night, which was obviously this is from a few days ago, but he says that this Pakistani refugees from North Waziristan that had fled across, he also used the word border, Afghanistan, Sangar. If you noticed, we're going to go after the semantics here. He used the word border. He didn't use the phrase Durand line, but he said that these people fled to Afghanistan before the 2014 ज़रब-e-Azb operation, and they are living there in camps with a very bad standard of living. And yesterday, the Pakistani Air Force bombed them. So, on top of all of the suffering that they have and we have, as in the people of Waziristan, have undergone, they are now being bombed within Afghanistan. So there should be investigations and disciplinary proceedings pursued against the people that approved this operation. And even though I know that no such thing will happen and there will be no such accountability, I still have to record my protest and my disagreement with this operation over here. And Sangar, your video agam the deputy Lloyd Restiz Haji Mali Khan.
Let's go to Haji Mali Khan. Here we go. No, this is the other Zabiullah Mujahid statement. Mohsen Dawar, Haji Mali Khan. Okay, here we go. So can you briefly explain who Haji Mali Khan is?
Haji Mali Khan is, I believe he's the uncle of Anas.
Yes.
Yes,
and
he's the uncle of Anas, and he's the deputy chief of staff of the army.
And he was also the guy who was imprisoned with Anas Haqqani.
Yes.
And he got released as part of the exchange deal with
on a separate note, so someone told me it wasn't Bo Bergdahl, it was Timothy Weeks, just to clarify.
Oh
But,
yeah. This was Timothy Weeks. I'm sorry.
2019. Yeah, no, it's fine. But
Yeah.
just, someone's gonna record it and post it on Twitter, be like, these guys don't know what they're talking about. but someone told me that the Haqqani family are basically the new Muhammad Zay. And whilst I don't agree, I just found it funny and I thought it should be mentioned. So this is Haji Mali Khan, who is the Afghan Deputy Chief of Staff for the army, addressing those refugees from Waziristan in Khost, and they are distinct, I'm sure you could tell, by the absolutely majestic pakol that the guy on the left is wearing. But yeah, let's hear what he has to say.
I personally, I think this pakol is going overboard. This is extremism. I think this is going just too far. I can tolerate the style that I have, but this is just this should be banned.
You think so?
Yes. Okay, let's play the video.
Let's hear what he has to say.
Okay, so he starts off by saying that those airplanes, those military airplanes that were left in Kabul, they are demolished. Those that were still worthy of usage. The previous regime, they took those airplanes with them when they escaped to Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, and the only military air power that they have are primarily transport, so they can use those helicopters and airplanes for transportation. But basically he's saying that the current Air Force of Afghanistan doesn't have any offensive capabilities. However, with regards to
ground forces, I don't see any such force that could possibly overtake or overwhelm these mujahideen that are gathered here.
You can hear it?
Yeah, so he's basically saying that he's carrying instructions from the leadership, ordering them to not move anywhere and to have full confidence and reassurance that nothing will come to them and that tomorrow that mujahideen will reach them to defend them, basically.
Yeah, so he says these regions, these territories, some of those areas were basically handed over to the Pakistanis by the Ashraf Ghani regime, which is beyond his control. However, for as long as he is able, or for as long as the military force of the government of Afghanistan is capable, they will defend these people who are seeking refuge with them, which is, I think, one of the points that should be made clear. When the Taliban and before even Taliban, Afghans fled Afghanistan and sought refuge in the tribal areas, these people from Waziristan, they provided them with protection and with shelter. based on the fact that they were muhajirin. Now the roles are turned. Now they are the muhajirin and they're seeking protection in Afghanistan. So obviously you have to see the words and the statements of Haji Mali Khan in that context. And he's saying that I've been ordered to come and check all the military force along the Durand Line in this region, and we are prepared. Only thing that we are waiting for is a command from the authorities to strike. So the only reason why they're not striking back is because there is no order to strike from the authorities. And he's saying that with regards to airplanes, well, the Americans also had airplanes when they were defeated. He said, you've all known that you all know what happened with the Americans, despite the fact that they had airplanes, with the help of these people, referring to those people from Waziristan. Noteworthy that what we have achieved. And he said we're not that coward or dishonorable that we won't.
Beghairat for everyone that's a
Yes.
native.
Yeah, to summarize basically the rest of what he's saying is that as long as there is no order from the leadership of the Islamic Emirate, the defense forces will not act against Pakistan. So yeah, this statement or this video, why did they release this video of him speaking to these people? What is your analysis?
Domestic and external audience.
Exactly.
You know, even if you sort of look at the way everyone's been gathered here, it is very clear that the people there, to a large extent or a large number of them, are from Waziristan.
Yes.
That's the first thing that I thought. So it's very much a reassurance. He even says Dartola Dizmujawstasi Mantiqeti, right, which is soft, diluted diet Pashtun nationalism, right? Which is basically, you know, we are all one, there's no real difference between us, and we are here and we will defend you up until our last. He says the Stasu defaz mujbandi farzda, so on and so forth. And it also conveys a message across the Durand Line of the seriousness with which this is being taken, as in, you know, these may be people from Waziristan, but the Deputy Chief of Army Staff is here to reassure them, and you know, we are prepared and equipped and whatever. The only thing we're waiting for is an order, which, if you think of it, takes you to that, you know, that Latin saying. I obviously can't speak Latin. If you want peace, prepare for war. This is basically, we are prepared for war.
Yes, and somebody asked in the chat, what is the military capability of the Islamic Emirate in case of any war with Pakistan? Well, to say it out bluntly, Afghanistan doesn't have an atomic bomb. So Afghanistan is not capable of going to war with Pakistan and using
conventional war.
Yes, so that's one issue. The second issue is that what a lot of people don't realize is that the Afghan Taliban have a huge support base in Pakistan. So there are probably thousands of madrasas in Pakistan of Pakistanis who are sympathetic to the Taliban. We have a very large political movement in Pakistan, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, which has sort of certain positions that align with the Afghan cause. We have then the Pashtun nationalists in Pakistan, such as PTM and ANP, who are also not very pro-Pakistani army. So
To be fair, speaking about them specifically, I genuinely think they would back the Pakistani army over Afghanistan.
yes, sure. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not a simple black and white, all Pakistan against all Afghanistan. There are a lot of people in Pakistan who oppose any conflict with Afghanistan. There are a lot of people in Pakistan who are sensible enough to realize that both countries depend on each other. So stability in Pakistan results into stability in Afghanistan and vice versa. Then we have these internal issues in Pakistan and internal issues in Afghanistan, which is something that, we cannot isolate these tensions and see it as something entirely Afghan or something entirely Pakistani. We have discussed this matter at length in our previous live stream, where we discussed the peace negotiations between TTP and the Pakistani government during the Imran Khan era. Basically, our position, like my position, is that after 43 years of war in Afghanistan, after 43 years of crisis and instability in Pakistan as well, right now it is not the right time, it is not appropriate for either Pakistan or Afghanistan to try to go after any issue that will further, create instability in the region. On the contrary, the sensible thing and the realist thing is to try to seek as much as you can, mutual understanding, and we need to pursue mutual interests between Afghanistan and Pakistan. But sadly, due to internal conflict in Pakistan with ousting of Prime Minister Imran Khan and their own all sorts of economic and social matters, it is very difficult for Pakistan to have a coherent, policy towards Afghanistan. Similarly, in Afghanistan, we have a government that came into existence 8 months ago. This government has its huge problems. We will discuss that later. But during this live stream, but aside from their problems, they also have a historic relationship with the Pakistani Taliban. They cannot just go and massacre Pakistani Taliban because Pakistani government wants them to do that.
Exactly. And
it's a complicated matter, but
as always with matters of war and peace, it's complicated. It's not. So, we need to come out of this understanding of conventional war between Afghanistan and Pakistan, because it's not going to happen. And if it were to be done as such, I think Pakistan would have been a lot braver, a lot quicker. But there are other factors at play here. And just as within Afghanistan, we have cleavages within our society, primarily ideological, and that obviously, especially over the last 20 years, has correlated itself with ethnicity. We also have the same cleavages within Pakistan. So the reality of the matter, and this is a topic with which all of these countering violent extremism people will be very well acquainted with, is that you have a very large chunk of people in Pakistan, of Pakistanis, that would not necessarily support Afghanistan against Pakistan and pick up guns, but who, rightly or wrongly, believe that Afghanistan is has a more Islamic government than Pakistan. Okay? rightly or wrongly, they believe that the Amir in Afghanistan has a greater right to religious authority than the government in Islamabad does. And that is a feeling, of course, that will be even further increased by the ousting of Imran Khan. So you have these sorts of realities here, and this isn't something that's necessarily restricted toward Pashtuns or people in the tribal areas, but this is a feeling that, you know, a lot of people who have gone to Deobandi or maybe even Barelwi madrasas will have this sort of feeling, right? So going to war with Afghanistan in that sense would not necessarily be conducive for Pakistan's own domestic stability, and that's obviously something that the leadership will have taken account of. Furthermore, you know, coming back to the army and coming back to America, being seen to go to war generally with another Muslim country is something that would be sort of inevitably, it would draw some level of controversy at home. And finally, let's say a conventional war were to emerge. The reality is that Pakistan is not going to commit itself toward invading and occupying all of Afghanistan. Let's assume militarily that were possible. Let's assume that happened. It would very quickly bankrupt a country already on economic ruin. So then the question would become, how would this war play out? And the way in which this war would play out would also lead to a very large insurgency in mountainous terrain in which people like the TTP and Taliban have already demonstrated their prowess. So these are the sort of things that we have to take into account. And obviously, I don't want to say this, you know, with reference to you know, the cleavages within Pakistani society. We also have that within Afghanistan as well. There are many elements in Afghan society who, I will tell you, despite their protestations against Pakistan, will ally with Pakistan against the Taliban because of ideological sort of interests. So these things work both ways in both countries. I'm going to go to the live chat for a bit. Avoid playing with the words and going around in circles. I mean, you're not really someone to tell me what to do. I'll say what I want. But the soil of Afghanistan must not be used for Pakistan and vice versa, period. Respect Doha agreements since you claim yourself pious Muslim. Okay, so Osama Qayyum here is under the impression that, that, you know, we are the decision makers in Kabul. And now he's saying, I find it ridiculous when you label the Pakistani army as an American puppet. Actually, had it not been for the Pakistani army, Taliban would have been long disintegrated. That may be true, but it's also true that were the Pakistani army not so allied with the Americans, there would be no such thing as a TTP in the first place. So kind of have to adopt a broader perspective here.
Okay, so we don't have much time, so let's move on to the Amir Akhundzada's statement.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go.
Should I read it out loud?
Yeah, just 1 second. So first of all, the Amir of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, Hibatullah Akhundzada, issued a statement on the 14th of March 2022. Okay, so it's not a new statement. However, this statement was read out on the Afghan National Radio and Television channel recently. I think it was yesterday. So it's sort of reiterating what he has already said. And there are several very interesting points in this statement which reveal it basically reveals a lot of things that we suspected that is going on, and that is a huge problem, and we will discuss that at length. So if you can read out the first paragraph, the first sentence, please.
Okay, so bear in mind, I don't have my glasses here, and the quality of the image that I have is not great. So if I make any mistakes, please forgive me. So, the Islami Imarat Tolu Mujahideen Tad Ali Qadr Amir al-Mu'mineen Hafizahullah Hidayat, which means guidance and advice to all of the Mujahideen of the Islamic Emirate from the esteemed Amir al-Mu'mineen. اوكي الله تعالی په خپل فضل او کرم سره د اسلامي امارت ټول مجاهدین ته یو ستره فتح ورنصیب کړ. So God Almighty in his generosity and blessings, generosity and kindness, has ordained a lofty conquest for the mujahideen of the Islamic Emirate, which is now being tested in a great way. The dela parache mujahideen la de stara azmoyena bariali si bayad landi takuta jiddi pamlarana wasi, and for the mujahideen to prevail over these tests or these testing times, the below recommendations should be paid attention to with all seriousness.
Okay. So this statement was published on the 14th of March. Before the 14th of March, in the last couple of months, what we heard is that there are a lot of issues going on in Afghanistan, in governing the country, in appointing people in different positions of, in the administration of the country. These issues have resulted into some tensions. There are some arguments going on within different institutions in Afghanistan, because we are dealing with an insurgent movement that is moving away from being an insurgent movement into actually governing the country. Now, obviously, governing a country is not as simple as fighting an insurgency. People will get really offended maybe by hearing this, but what is an insurgency essentially? Basically, you use the geography of Afghanistan in different parts of the country to stage attacks against the military and the security forces, and it's hit and run. Okay, you stage an attack, you attack, you retreat, and then you attack somewhere else. It can be very complicated, it is very daring, and it is very dangerous, because a lot of people will get killed doing that. But if you bring it down to its most basic elements, it is pretty straightforward. Governing, however, means that you are dealing with a huge bureaucracy. You deal with thousands and thousands of government employees working in different government institutions, whether it's defense, policing, security, or administration, doing all sorts of administrative jobs in different departments. It's something that you cannot expect from people who have been fighting an insurgency for the last 20 years to just take over and then do it without any problems. So we are having huge problems in Afghanistan. People are very dissatisfied with how people are being appointed to different positions. Whether it's people within the Taliban or outside the Taliban movement, people are obviously very angry and frustrated. Now, if you bear that in mind, what I just said, then if we read out now these different points, then you will see what is actually being said here. So please, the first point.
So, number أول طول مجاهدين خپل نیتونه خالص لله فله وګرځوي, which means all mujahideen must renew their intentions to be for God and sort of fil, which is like in God as well. So sort of seek the protection of God in sort of your in safeguarding your intention, and make your intention solely for him. Number two.
And before you move on, okay, so before we went live, we sort of had a small discussion about this point, and we were saying, what does this mean? And you said rightly that basically they are a religious organization. Yes? So Taliban are a religious movement, and they have fought an insurgency, and that religious nature of the organization is what defines them from anything else. And that's why the first and foremost thing that he addresses is of a very religious nature, namely your intention and etc. So this might sound really odd and strange to anyone who is not really familiar with what the Taliban really are, but I think, it's very important to make a distinction. So from a very realistic perspective, you don't define movements and groups merely by the way you see them, but you also have to acknowledge how they identify themselves. Okay? So if a particular group, organization, a person, or whatever, if they see themselves as a religious movement, you have to take that into account when you are trying to analyze their statements. And this is exactly what is the case here. This movement, their leader, identifies his movement as a religious movement. So that's why the first and foremost point that he's going to make in his address is of religious nature. Second.
Number 2, مشران او کشران د تقوا په زینت سره خپل ځانونه شایسته کړي. So, elders and youngsters alike must beautify themselves with the adornment of religious faith. That's a good translation.
Yes.
Okay. Number 3. د الله تعالی ډیر حمد ووایاست چې د مقدس جهاد په برکت او په خپل نصرت سره عظیمه فتح در په برخه کړه. Which means thank God, express thankfulness to God a lot, because he gave you a lofty conquest in the holy jihad as a result of the manifestation of his own blessings. Number 4.
Just before you move on to number 4, another major point that what we can extract from this particular point is that the leader of the movement says that the victory was granted to them by God. It's not something that they got merely from based on their own virtue of being a military power. And this is a very important point, because the Taliban as a movement, they did not have the same capabilities as the Americans. They didn't have the air power. They didn't have the modern technology, the advanced technology. They didn't have the drones, the surveillance equipment. All of those things, they didn't have it. So there needs to be a rational explanation from their perspective to how they managed to defeat the enemy. So their explanation is merely, well, if it wasn't for God, we would have never done this. And why does he remind his subordinates first and foremost of that in the first few points? Is to make them aware that the fact that you have won the war and that you have now the authority of the government, it doesn't mean that you're so great and wonderful that you have achieved that. You have to be aware that it was given to you by God. So it's not like you've been so great and fantastic. So it's like a way to tell people, humble yourselves.
Okay. Number 4. Per څلرم په ټولو چارو کې د عدل او انصاف څخه کار واخلي. اخلي. Yeah, which basically means the same thing. In all affairs, make usage of justice and fairness. Number 5.
And before you move on, now here starts the critical tone towards the movement, because obviously there's something going on, that there is apparently some injustice, some unfairness going on, and that he is going to address that in the following points. So merely from this point we can derive that even the leadership are being made aware of huge problems within the movement, which basically what we have been observing in the last couple of months. Number 5.
Pinzem. Ihsan wakres. Once again, sorry guys, I don't have my glasses here. Ihsan wakres. So be generous to your tormented nation. So be nice, basically. Number 6, shpajam, the kibr, ghurur, ujub, zulm, aw khiyanat sakhadzanuna wasate. Protect yourselves from arrogance, haughtiness. Ujub is like to be amazed with yourself, self-amazement, to be taken aback by yourself. So protect yourselves from arrogance, haughtiness, ujub, zulm, which is oppression, and khiyanat, which is treachery. So once again, protect yourselves from all of those things.
So all of these, before we move on, all of these issues have been playing up in the last couple of months. We have seen people from the Emirate slapping people on their faces, okay? For totally unnecessary issues. They just use their authority that I am part of the movement and we've just taken over the country, so you have to obey me. If anyone who disobeyed them or didn't listen to their commands, obviously not entirely all across the country, but there were such incidents. There were cases of people driving around in government vehicles, disregarding traffic rules and basically harassing people. There have been cases of people in position of authority who used government facilities and places for private usage, like somebody organized wedding of their son in a government building. Like, you know any more examples of these cases of
the
arrogance?
passport director's brother?
Yeah, the passport director's brother used his brother's name and authority to basically conduct what can be described as, I don't know, basically
drinking and whoring, as they would say in old England.
Yes, drinking and whoring. And there are many such cases where we see people being very arrogant and very unfair and unjust towards people, towards even their own ranks. Like
I wanna just, with regard to the passport director's drinking and whoring, passport director's brother, but it's true that he was punished. He was caught and he was punished. And that is obviously something that's praiseworthy. But the fact that he was able to do this in a government office points to deeper systemic issues that need to be sorted out. So yes, he was punished and it's been prevented, but these sorts of things should not be happening in the first place.
Yeah, so that's why when you see point number 5 mentioning these matters, it's not just out of the blue. He makes just a random statement pointing out some issues. No, actually, those things are happening right now in Afghanistan. There are even videos, audio and video recordings of such incidents. It's a huge problem. And this is also one of the reasons why there is growing distrust towards the government. There is growing dissatisfaction from people in Afghanistan towards the government. And it is basically creating a situation where people have totally changed their minds. Like, we can remember shortly after the fall of the previous regime in August, September and October, there was a lot of euphoria. A lot of people who were opposed to the Emirates for years and years, they became more sympathetic towards them. People were like, you know what, these Taliban, they're not as bad as I used to think. But now, because of these incidents, those same people are saying, you know what, these people are entirely unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive. Please proceed.
د قوم پرستی، منطقه پرستی، لسان پرستی و اندیوال پرستی څخه بکلکه پرهیز وکړئ, which means strictly abstain from ethnocentrism, regionalism, linguistic preferentialism, and Andiwal Paraste, which is nepotism, right? Which is going to a broader point we've heard that there's a tendency for the different sectors or the different organs of government, because they're staffed by people from different provinces. So for example, intelligence is dominated by people from Ghazni, right, Sangar? So there's obviously a preference within intelligence. I'm not saying this on the basis of any reports, but these are the sorts of the general gist of the things that we're hearing, that whichever organ will have a preference for people of its own background, whether that's ethnic or whether that's regional, or whether that's linguistic, or whether that's just nepotism, their own family members and friends, which obviously ties into all of these things. So especially in Afghanistan, nepotism, ethnocentrism, linguistic preferentialism, they all tend to tie with one another. Now, number 8.
Before you move on to number 8, what is very important to note, as I said in the beginning, the Taliban were basically an insurgent movement for the last 20 years. So every valley, every region in Afghanistan had its own Taliban network based on local people. So if we say in Baghlan, the Taliban are predominantly people from different districts of Baghlan, and those people tend to also be related to one another. They also tend to speak the same language, and they also tend to have the same ethnicity. And similarly, if we deal with Taliban from, let's say, Takhar or from Badakhshan, they are obviously from a particular ethnicity, from a particular region, and from particular, they speak a particular language. Once this movement stops being an insurgent movement separated into different valleys, different regions of the country, and once this movement is forced to act like a centralized system of government, you will have problems because people don't know each other. Like even people from Logar, like the Taliban from Logar, they don't know everyone from the Taliban in Maidan Wardak, which is a neighboring province. So once they have to work within government institutions along one another, you will have problems. They don't know each other. They will have the tendency to recruit people or appoint people that they already know. And that may be seen as nepotism. There are even specific examples of people who were not qualified, but they were appointed to a position merely because they were related to a local commander in district somewhere. And that was also later revealed when there were cases of corruption. So there was this case of someone who was involved in smuggling weapons across the Durand line into Pakistan. And when they investigated the matter, they found out that the guy who was involved in that particular smuggling case was appointed to his position because he was related to someone else in that particular area. So these matters are now all coming to the surface. We all hear these problems emerging. And this is a serious challenge for this movement for the foreseeable future. Because as a student of governance, I know that, that the modern administrative state in Western countries, they didn't emerge out of nothing. They have a history since the Enlightenment, a process of gradually developing and progressing into what they are right now. And this is something that required hundreds of years of development. You have people who are taught in ethics, in law, in management, and all these other disciplines. And those people are then appointed to position of power in government. But the Taliban didn't do any of that. They don't have any of that. It's not like the previous regime had all those qualified people. Certainly not. But they had some people who had some sort of education in administration, but it was still very limited and they were still very incompetent. But the Taliban have even bigger disadvantage on that particular field. So this is why when we see how they are mismanaging a lot of government organizations, it's because of that. And if we see that there are some cases of nepotism or basically appointing your cousin from your village to some position, it's because of that. They have no idea how to do that. They have no idea how to conduct the affairs of a state. Next point, please.
Let's go. So, امتياز بعد بتقوى أو أمانتداري سروي. So, privilege should be based on God consciousness and trustworthiness. Number 9. بقبلوا ما ينزلوا كده اعتماد ورلو wait. Okay. So, بقبلوا ما ينزلوا كده اعتماد أورور ولي فضاء قائمة كري, which is establish amongst yourselves an atmosphere of brothership and trust. Number 10.
Just one second. So number 8 was?
Number 8 was امتياز بعد بتقوى أو أمانتداري وسروي.
Okay, so appoint people based on taqwa, which is
God consciousness.
God consciousness and
trustworthiness.
Trustworthiness.
Yes.
What has happened, as I mentioned before, they have appointed people to many positions where they were not suitable to do that kind of job. That's a systematic problem in the last couple of months that we hear, and those people may not always be just incompetent. Some of them were simply also not reliable people. They have wasted government resources, and there were even some cases of corruption. So the statement acknowledges that that's actually going on. That's a problem. Otherwise, he wouldn't address it. So there are people who are in denial and they say, no, nothing of that nature is happening. Emiratis, everything is fantastic. But no, that is actually happening, and this is why he's addressing it. If it wasn't happening, there was no need for him to address this in the statement. And number 9 was?
Number 9 was
Yeah, and this relates to what I said previously. Since they don't know each other, there is some level of distrust, and they are basically working like what I've heard from people who are in Kabul and the other parts of the country is that because there is miscommunication, lack of communication, there is lack of internal cohesion, they work against each other. In different institutions, they work against each other, and it's a serious case of misadministration. Yes, next.
Sure. There's just in the comments in the chat section, we've still got the TTP debate going on, and I wouldn't comment, but Osama Qayyum keeps tagging me to say that the TTP are doing takfir of Pakistan, and I don't know how to tell you, Osama. Sorry, I'm not in the TTP. What do you want me to say? We're talking about something else right now. So number 10. لداس يارا كتون تسخدزان وساتي شخبل مينسكي دبيت مادي را منستكوي. So abstain from such actions that will amongst yourselves cause a lack of trust. يوول سم و 11 بخبل مينسكي دا أمر بالمعروف أو نهي عن المنكر فريزا ما بريجدي منزنا بجامعات سر أداكري. So do not amongst yourselves abandon the obligation to enjoin the good and forbid the evil, and pray your prayers in congregation. So
just
for those...
don't forget what you're saying, okay? Don't forget what you're saying. Basically, he's saying, do amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar amongst yourself. the commanding of good and preventing of vice amongst each other. So this is a very important point. The Taliban are a religious movement. They have a ministry of commanding good and preventing vice.
Which you'll find out more about in the coming weeks.
Yeah, but that ministry is instructed to basically command the good and prevent vice in the society, but also within the movement. And he is reiterating the fact that it's not you, the guys who are Taliban with the beards and turbans, telling other people, don't do this and do that, but you should do that within yourself, because obviously there are serious issues within the movement. Like we had this huge car accident where 12 people were killed because the people of the emirate, the Taliban, were exceeding speed limit, driving on the opposite side of the road and crashing into a truck. All people sitting in that vehicle, all these members of Taliban, they were all killed. They caused a huge traffic incident, and these guys are supposed to implement the law. These guys are supposed to be the ones who tell other people how to act and how to behave and how to obey the law. They were the ones who were causing the traffic pileup. They eventually caused such a big accident that all the guys sitting in the car got killed. That's the reality. That's the reality of the situation in Afghanistan. These huge matters are causing serious problems for the current government. Next, please.
Now, ببيت المالكي دخيانات كولو تسخت زانونا وساتي, which means protect yourselves or abstain from committing treachery in the public treasury, which is basically, in layman's terms, do not steal from public funds. Number 13, the Shaydanu, wait, okay. ديالسن دشايدانو كورنيو أولادو شكفالت كوي أو هيتس كلاي ليادة مباسي. Do not forget the families and the children of the martyrs and treat them well. Number 14, يودا بالبكارونو كي لمداخلتك جدي باريز وكري, which is strictly abstain from interfering in one another's affairs. والسلام. Okay,
so this statement, even though it is old, it is a couple of weeks old, it was published as a video. It was read out on the national TV in Afghanistan yesterday. Why? What's your take on that?
I think just because it shows that the government, all right, the Amir is not visible, and as of yet, he's sort of yet to come out. So this is basically a way to show, especially with everything that has happened, that the government is still engaged and giving necessary advice and guidance to its personnel, essentially.
Yes, and what is also very important, at least what I've understood from the people who have met the Amir in the last couple of weeks, they said that during the visit in Kandahar, they talked about different matters. And what is going on is that there are people going from all different institutions, you know, in leadership roles. Sorry. They're basically going there and complaining because of all these issues. So the complaints are rising. There are people dissatisfied within the movement by many issues. And I'm sorry, I need to really take a break from talking. Yes, so what was I saying? Yeah, so essentially what is going on is that while we see all these lofty statements by different spokespeople and ministers, like the one that you mentioned earlier, we are very hopeful that the secondary education for girls will resume soon. You know, these very bland statements that show that, yes, we are doing something about it. Every government anywhere in the world, you will have officials making statements like that, sort of hiding and covering up that there are serious problems. What I recommend everyone to do, if you want to understand more about this particular issue, is to watch a British sitcom called Yes Minister and the subsequent Yes Prime Minister. It's a comedy from the 70s and 80s, and it's about the British public administration. And every line in that sitcom is not just a script written by some comedian trying to be funny. If you study government, if you study public administration, if you understand how governments function, whether it's in a very advanced and developed country such as the United Kingdom, or a developing country in Afghanistan who has seen war for the last 43 years, you will see the same parallels. You will see the same problems, because that is the nature of governance. That is the nature of public administration. And that's why it is very vital for any layman in these matters to watch, observe, and think what is being said. Because, like, for instance, you have all these different parts of Yes Minister, the sitcom, where a administrator is trying to dictate what the minister needs to do or what he needs to say. And there is a lot of tension between the minister and his administrative organization, different institutions under his authority. And there is a lot of bureaucratic, there's a culture which prevents effective and efficient functioning of the state. Now, in Afghanistan, what is currently the problem is that, as we discussed earlier, the Taliban are not prepared or not capable of taking over the country and doing everything in a very well-organized, functioning manner. There are huge problems. And those tensions and those problems don't come out to the surface just blatantly for us to see, but they are currently causing a lot of issues. And these statements, such as this by the Amir of the Islamic Emirate, are basically, we should see this as an acknowledgement. The reason why you asked me why we need to discuss this, I told you it's necessary. And we need to discuss this. Why? Because this is an acknowledgement. This is an acknowledgement that all those points that were mentioned, that's actually happening. And the first and foremost thing what you need as a leader, as someone who is responsible, as someone who is in position of authority, is to acknowledge what is going on, what is wrong, what is a problem. And I think, we cannot expect from the Taliban to do everything perfectly. I've never expected that from them, and far from it. I think they will probably mess up a lot of more stuff. But at least, please, give us some sort of acknowledgement, and don't pretend that you know what you're doing, because you don't. They have no idea what they're doing, and this acknowledgement is the first step. So that's what I wanted to say with this regard.
I mean, ultimately, I think that it goes back to, and I think we'll wrap it up on this point as well, because فكركم بستاد إفطار وقتهم راني جديدة بعد ما دام داسي يومي مساد بعد خو خير ده. We'll wrap it up with this. So it goes back to what you were saying about insurgencies, right? And I remember, when the Taliban first took over, you had all of these previous government regime people that were like, oh, but governing is different to fighting an insurgency. ruling a country is different. And I remember I tweeted, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to take lessons on how to govern effectively from people who failed in governing and failed at war. Like, you guys sit this one out. And the reason I'm mentioning them is because a lot of people, especially in Afghanistan, we have a rather strong presence of opportunists that, you know, they pop their heads up and they try to become prominent once again every once in a while. So with all of these criticisms, it's like we need to we need to remember who we're taking advice from. Now, when it comes to insurgency versus government, look, ultimately, if you are an insurgency, having a transparent decision-making process and a clear hierarchy and chain of command and a well-defined sort of legal prerogative, these things are not priority, right? And in fact, they would actually be a liability because they work against you. When it comes to governance, however, though, if you're a political organization, a religious political organization like the Taliban, at some point you have to make a choice, right? You have to make a choice about, are you a armed organization that has seized control of the reins of the state, or are you the state and the government? Now, what I mean by that is that one of the things that I'm getting really bored of hearing is Islami Emirat, Emirat Islami, the Islamic Emirate, this, that, the Islamic Emirate, this, the Islamic Emirate, that. And the reason for that is that, what is the Islamic Emirate, right? The Islamic Emirate is the official name of the Taliban, as in it is a partisan label, right? Now, if the state's designation is the Islamic Emirates, the same way that it's, you know, the Iranians is the Islamic Republic and Pakistanis is the Islamic Republic, you don't need to mention that in every instance, right? You don't need to make the state or the territory or the country a tool in your partisan kit, right? It suffices to say the government, right? But what it reflects is the fact that there still is not an understanding prevalent enough that, oh, damn, we are actually the government. So, for example, the fact that there is no transparent decision-making process. We were told, and I've had a lot of people get very angry at me. I had one guy messaging me on Twitter. He said, you know, you, for the sake of your followers, you're now singing a different tune and you're now criticizing very strongly the Islamic Emirate. And I said, no, if something's retarded, I'll criticize it, irrespective of who does it. So we promised for 7 months that schools will open on this day. And as Afghans, we were waiting for this day for these schools to be open, right? So we could finally breathe a sigh of relief and be like, all right, yes, we can move forward. Maybe Alda Hakim will stop counting as well, right? And in the face of all of that, the schools remained closed. Now, you would think we would have an explanation as to why they were closed, why that promise was broken. We still don't, right? There is no transparency in the governance or the decision-making structure. This isn't, you know, I'm pointing, do we know actually? Well, we have sources that tell us what happens, but, you know, if we're being credible, ethical journalists, we're not going to divulge what those sources reveal to us on condition of anonymity or requesting us not to leak it elsewhere. But we're journalists. The actual people in Afghanistan, they have no idea what's going on, just as they have no idea what the response to this Pakistani airstrike is going to be. So these are the things that, and once again, I get the argument, you know, give them time. It's not easy to transition from an insurgency to a government. I 100% agree. And these are the things, these are some of the symptoms that are very apparent to us, but they're not helping themselves either. Right?
Yes.
Just yesterday, you had this report of this guy from the former regime's Ministry of Interior, who was called into work, right? And he's ended up dead. And now the Ministry of Interior is promising an investigation, whatever. Now the problem is that other instances in which there have been investigations promised, we've never actually found out what those investigations results were, right?
Yes.
So we currently are operating, whether we like it or not, in a state of emergency. Like I said, you and I have the privilege as journalists of having contacts and numbers and sources and whatever. Other people don't. And we don't even live there, right? So it would be natural to assume that people living in Afghanistan would want to know what actually is going on. And that's something which they're not finding out, right?
And this is causing huge distrust and dissatisfaction. And a lot of people
within
are
the
saying,
Taliban, by the way.
exactly.
Within the Taliban.
Within the movement, people are dissatisfied. They're complaining. They think that things aren't going to the right direction. And I think, we have just a couple of more minutes and then we wrap it up. What I wanted to say in the beginning of the stream, as Waleed pointed out, we are now currently in a different paradigm. Before, when we started AFGHANEYE, it was all about providing a counter narrative to the war on terror, the whole notion that gains of the last 20 years, that Afghanistan is a paradise thanks to the occupation and the kleptocracy that were set up in Kabul. We were saying, no, this is BS. There's not. It's not all.
Well, we didn't say it like that, but yeah.
Yeah, but just to.
Yeah.
And now we have the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, and this Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, with this lofty name, are they actually doing what they promised? Are they actually functioning as a normal government? Are they meeting the needs of the people? Are they actually competent and capable of governing Afghanistan? So far, what we have seen, the answer is a resounding no. And this needs to change. So what we will critique that. We will critique them based on all the information that we have access to. And that's why stay tuned. Subscribe to
That is essentially, that we are caught between two things here. And as Afghans, it's Ramadan. As Muslims, as Afghans, as journalists, as people that want to be objective, we have to call out excesses and abuses. Now, like I said, the global infrastructure that underpinned the occupation and the pillaging of Afghanistan for the last 20 years remains intact, right? They are still there, right? That whole operation, that enterprise still exists. However, we also have a government that seems to be intent on justifying them at every given point. When they said, right, that if the Taliban take over Afghanistan, or if there is a peace deal in Afghanistan, that women will be banned from schools, guess who justified and proved them right? It wasn't us, right? It was the Islamic Emirate. So we are caught in a circumstance whereby we have foreigners, primarily Westerners, pushing an ideological interest in Afghanistan, using that to interfere in Afghanistan. That's on this side. On this side, we have a government that acts in a way that gives them every justification to do so, right? And so that is where we are, and that is for the foreseeable future, I hope, where we will be. And I say I hope because I still acknowledge that where we are today is better than where we were last year or 2 years ago. And in no way do I want us to revert back to that. So on that note, Ramadan Mubarak, guys, an uncharacteristic religious endorsement on our channel. So Ramadan Mubarak, guys. I hope it's going well for you as well, Sangar. And that was today's live stream. We're back after a while. We've been very busy. And please do stay tuned for some of the things that we are working on right now or will be working on in future. Speaking of Amr bil Ma'ruf, I would like to say that, I am working on something with regard to that ministry, so keep your eyes out for that. Inshallah ta'ala, I'll have a newsletter covering the last 2 months out for the first-ish of May. And we'll see how it goes, inshallah ta'ala.
Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks.
Oh,
everyone.
wait. And like the video. No one liked the video. Like the video. And please share the link on your social media handles so that other people can find us or watch this live stream. So like the video, because I am watching the like count and it's not where it needs to be, quite frankly.
It's time for me to go offline because it's almost time for iftar. Thank you all, and wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.